Aloha, my name is Julie Mitchell and I'm the Executive Director for Ikahi Mediation Center. Most of you know who we are. For those who haven't been with us, we are a nonprofit community mediation center. We've been serving East Hawaii since 1983, first as a program of the Island of Hawaii YMCA, and in 2006, we became our own independent nonprofit. So it's like 15-year anniversary this year for the one and 38 years for the other. Our mission is to empower people to come together, to talk and to listen, to explore options and to find their own best solutions. And to achieve this mission, we offer mediation, facilitation, and trainings like this one to strengthen the ability of diverse individuals and groups to resolve interpersonal conflicts and community issues. Our free brown bag lunch series is held every third Thursday at 12 noon on Zoom, and you just need to register on Eventbrite each time to get our link. The next speaker will be Joan Schaefer on January 20th. And her talk is going to be on the power of positivity, how to affect optimal performance for yourself and others. And I'm going to, in the chat, I'm putting the link to register and a little note about what I just said right now. Okay. Also, another event we're having coming up is we just scheduled our next basic mediation training. It's starting on March 19th. So this is a 4-day training. Is how our professionally trained volunteer mediators can get their start. And what the model that the 5 nonprofit mediation centers use is we use professionally trained volunteers from the community to help other community members resolve conflicts. And we are always looking for additional volunteers who want to learn mediation skills and join our apprenticeship programs to help folks in the community resolve issues that matter deeply to them. It's also a great training just for staff development and personal development. So we've had parents take it because they want to be better in their families, and we've had people who want to have more skills on the job. So I'm also going to put the link to that in the chat. At the end of our talk, we are going to ask you to fill out a short online survey, and it helps with our grant funding for this series. And so I'll put the link in the chat for the survey at the end, and please do take a minute to click on that and give us your thoughts. And I'll also send out an email after the talk, including the slides, the video, and a link to that survey. So if you're not sure we have your email address, like if you got the Zoom link from a friend, you can privately send me your email in the chat as well, and I'll make sure you get that. Without further ado, I am very pleased to present our speaker, Dawn Menken. She holds a PhD and she's been working in the field of psychology and facilitator development for over 35 years. She is an internationally respected educator, facilitator, therapist, leadership coach, and conflict resolution specialist. She co-founded the nonprofit Process Work Institute, a graduate school dedicated to the training of facilitators in Portland, Oregon, which is where she is joining us from today. She is the author of 3 books, including her latest, Facilitating a More Perfect Union, a guide for politicians and leaders. So Dawn, please do take it away. And everybody, can we give her a big virtual Zoom round of applause to welcome her today. Take it away, Dawn.
Thank you so much, Julie. Aloha to everybody. I want to thank you, Julie, and the Ikahi Mediation Center. And I also want to thank Paula, who's here, who connected me with you all. I appreciate the work you're doing. I checked out your website. Great stuff you all are doing, and we have a lot in common. I think we're obviously in need of facilitation and mediation. So anything that anyone can do in that area, I'm really happy about. The topic today, as you see, let's see, I'm gonna be sharing my screen with this PowerPoint here. Let's see. Okay. Our topic for today, wait a sec, here we go. All right. A radical approach to political discourse. So friends, after screaming at my television set for 5 years, at least, I began to teach a course in 2020 because I realized I was screaming at my TV, coaching politicians from my couch. And I thought, oh my goodness, I know we all think this, we all get so disgusted with the whole political atmosphere and we want to do something different. So I thought, well, I've been giving advice from my couch and no one hears it. So I offered a class for international leaders in 2020. People from all over the world, we came together to discuss different ideas. And from that manuscript, I've recently published a book. If you're interested in it, it's about, actually, it's a short guide actually with tips for leaders and politicians. My examples in the book are mostly US centric, taken from recent times. And I think some of you might, if you do read that book, you might recognize some of the examples that I give. About me, I'm a therapist, I'm a coach, I'm a teacher, a facilitator, and I believe, let me just check in with you all. How many people here, can you give me an indication? How many people here would consider themselves leaders, actually? And if you care to show me your beautiful faces, it's always nice to see folks. How many people here consider themselves a leader? That could be in your community, it could be in your work, it could be in your families or your friendship groups or your religious organizations. Yeah, wherever you are. It could be in how you walk the streets every day, that you take leadership, you take ownership of what's going on and you choose to intervene. Well, thank you all for your work. How many of you work with leaders? How many of you are coaches or facilitators? Excellent. Great to hear. How many people here are activists? Who would identify themselves as an activist? Welcome to the activists. All right. And how many people are just concerned global citizens, kind of upset by what's going on? Anyone resonate with that? Well, welcome to you all. We are on the same page. Let me say that fundamental to my work, particularly this book and the work that I'm presently doing, is I want to plant the seed that our leaders and our politicians particularly are also facilitators. In my view, in our world, the facilitator is the least occupied role. And this means that, particularly in the political realm, that leaders must go beyond their stated platform and position themselves as facilitators for us all. My direction is to help create interest and excitement in the role of the facilitator in order to help change political discourse. I speak to how leaders can address polarization, how we can speak to both sides of an issue and go deeply into what moves that issue. My book also gives a lot of tips on how leaders and political folks can deal with attack and criticism, which is a big issue, but I don't think we're going to get there today. But let's talk first about what does it mean? Let's see. What does it mean for a politician or a leader to be a facilitator? And I want to mention the difficulty of politicians to be a facilitator, because fundamental to that is the hypnosis that there's only a certain way that you can do politics. And I confronted that in the writing of this book. I sent this book out for feedback to political operatives, people in the field, people who work with political people. And so many people are just hopeless and jaded. And many have become cynical and felt unable to stay close to their ideals. Some did feel that they were plodding away, trying to make the change and stay close to their deepest vision. But it's really hard to stay close to your vision if all of your political discourse is polled and measured and, calculated for political impact. It makes us not trust our politicians and our leaders. We don't come off as real. So I want to say this was part of the appeal of Donald Trump. Donald Trump did something that not many, well, he did a lot of things that not many politicians did, but fundamental, what he did was he tapped into the mistrust that the public has for politicians. And he blasted any kind of protocol. He refused to be handled. And his brand was to be real. I mean, you might not think he was real, but in his mind, he was being real. And this is how he presented himself. And he blasted any kind of protocol, any kind of, he refused to be handled. And he made fun of the stiff politician. And many really resonated with his style. They felt he was folksy, he spoke to people, and he was authentic. In my mind,
Dawn,
yes?
you have frozen a little bit. So if you could repeat what you just said, that would be great.
Okay, what did you last hear?
You said he was folksy, people resonated with him, and in my mind,
that's right. This should be, in my mind, this needs to be a wake-up call to our leaders, that if we don't pick up something of his style, now I don't want anyone, I'm making an assumption here. Well, sorry, that's my dog. The postwoman must be coming. Wait a second. All right. Sorry about that. That happens. If people, I'm making an assumption here, I think because of the interest in leadership and what the Ikahi Mediation Center does, I don't think we have many people who are elevating Trump as our best leader, put it that way. But he has qualities that have been appealing to a good portion of the United States population. And if we don't harness some of his energy and use it, we should expect demagogues to come forward to our peril. And what I mean about using that energy is I don't want anyone to be abusive or lying or bullying, but there's something about loosening up, not being so stiff and measured, talking directly to the people, breaking out of the confining political box and being able to be real. The public needs to feel its leaders. And I think Trump captivated that, and that is a learning that we can take from that. But let's talk about one of the other central difficulties in the leadership world and particularly the political world. Platforms and facilitation. Most politicians, all politicians, feel like they have to have a platform, and that's great. Platforms are important. They create a big buzz. Your constituencies flock to you. Money comes to you. It's really important. But at the same time, we forget that we are also leaders of an entire country or city or town, and we have to lead everybody. So built into the system is also, it's a zero-sum politics, meaning there's a winner and a loser, and it's unsustainable. Why is it unsustainable? Because losers always plot revenge. A winner does not stay a winner for long. A loser will plot revenge, and then gridlock will ensue, which is what's happening right now in the United States. And in many places, not just the US, by the way. But there's a one-sidedness that's built into the system. And the task is, how can we excite and generate money for the leader who positions herself as a facilitator? In other words, we need both visions. Say your platform, get excited about a platform, but at the same time, how can you represent two views. How can you include others? Now, this is a psychological challenge for most of us. Think of your own lives. Think of your own relationship scenes and communities. Most of us have a viewpoint, and most of us think we're right. Most of the time anyway, we think we're right and the other is wrong. We kind of think that way. We have conflicts with friends, with family, and we don't have always the capacity to hold more than one viewpoint at the same time. Doesn't mean you have to necessarily agree, but can you hold both viewpoints? And we don't grow up that way. That's the thing. We don't grow up learning how to hold a multitude of views. So the idea of facilitating a diversity is not something that we're at all comfortable with. So the challenge is, how can we state our viewpoint, but also go deeper into the other person's viewpoint and speak to that as well. Let's see here. I have another slide. Yeah, express your view, but how can you then state the opposing view? So let's take an issue. I'll give you an example. One thing that I do in my book is I have a few speeches that I think could be helpful to that I model of what politicians or leaders might say. So let's say you're trying to have a platform, but at the same time, you're trying to appeal to diverse views in the field or in the city or wherever you are. So let's say the issue is green energy, okay? So let's say I'm a politician and I'm talking about green energy. I might say something like this. Those of you who have been in the oil industry, those of you who have been coal miners, have made an unbelievable contribution in our world. We want to value you. You've done a great job, and you need to be applauded and appreciated for that. And now, decades later, we can't deny the impact on our environment of burning oil and coal. But as we move forward to a clean energy economy, you folks in the energy industry need to be appreciated, and you need to be brought into the newer clean energy industry. We can't leave you behind. You must be at the table when we talk, and we have to find a way to bring you in and go forward together. So that's an example where I'm obviously having a platform. We need to move on into a clean energy climate, but how can I value and speak to the other side? That is also part of this conversation. Does anyone have any questions about that so far? You all with me? Thank you. Well, I would like to do, I hope this is going to be fun. I've done this with a few other groups before. Here's a little exercise. And I'm wondering if you all are game, it would be fun to try this exercise together. And what I'd like you to do is take a few minutes, and maybe I'm going to read each step for you, and then it would be great. Maybe we can share some of them. So the first step, if you have a pen or a pencil or your computer or tablet, whatever, if you can jot down what's a political or social issue that you feel strongly about. Just name one issue. Don't think about it too much, otherwise we'll be here hours. But just think of an issue that you feel strongly about. And express that view, state it clearly in your inner mind or write it down. And then name your opponent's view. What is your opponent's view? Now, this is the challenging step. See if you can explore your opponent's view by going deeper into what moves them. You might even imagine to yourself, well, what kind of a person would think this way? And can you feel into the deeper experiences, the life history, whatever it is that moves that viewpoint? Get a sense of that. And then the last step is try and speak or craft a short speech, just like I showed you, that would state your view, but would also somehow speak to the depth of your opponent's view. Can you position yourself really as a facilitator, and that your goal would be to help the public dialogue and get to know the other side? That's what really we're wanting to do. I'll give you one more example as you're thinking about that. In my book, I took the issue of gay marriage, which in one of my examples, which I believe if you go back historically to both Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, I think both supported gay marriage, although they couldn't say it. I feel that they were unable to say it. They couldn't make that at the time as their platform because they did the calculus and they didn't feel the public was in back of them. But I believe they felt it. How can you present? How can you make a little speech that would then embrace both those viewpoints? So here's my example. See what you think. If I was one of them, I would have liked to have said, "My dear public citizens, I want you to know that in my heart of hearts, I really believe that people love who they love and that the government really has no place to legislate or discriminate against matters of the heart. However, I'm aware that as a country, we're split on gay marriage, and it's a very painful split with strong feelings on both sides. Many of us are gay, or we know family, friends, and colleagues who are gay, and we know that gay marriage is not a threat to society, but only enhances the deeper spirit of freedom and equality. However, there are many people in this country, and I'm speaking to so many of you who don't know gay people. You can't comprehend what it's like to love someone of your own sex. And some of us feel we can hardly reconcile our deeply held religious views. Therefore, we might sit in judgment, and we might use the legal system to prevent something we fear. As your president, I want you to know I hear both of these views, and I'm here to facilitate this conversation." So that would have been a possible speech that either of those two men might have made at a time where they felt they couldn't actually, interesting, they couldn't actually take a stand. They felt they wouldn't have been elected if they would have taken that kind of a stand. But how can you be authentic, state your platform, and talk about the facilitation that's needed? Yeah. So let me ask some of you, would someone be courageous enough in our time today where you actually might want to share your little speech? Was anyone able to do that exercise and might have the courage to say hello and read us your speech, a few sentences? Oh, I see a face coming on. Is that you, Ben? Whoop, I can't hear. If someone's talking, I can't hear you. Ben, you there?
Yeah, I didn't get so far as to craft a total speech, but I'll give you just a quick.
You want to spontaneously try something?
Okay, my issue is voter disenfranchisement, folks on the other side, or voter fraud.
Yeah.
They feel there's conspiracy, mistrust of the man, changing.
How would you speak to them? See if you could make it just spontaneous.
Yeah, I would say under the Constitution, we want to make sure every vote counts. That includes cities, rural areas, suburbia. We need to take politicians out of the mix to avoid the seesaw every time the political party changes. We're all concerned that if the votes, proper votes, be counted. So we need to look at how to ensure that happens. And actually, the mail-in ballot has been very good for both cities and rural people and older people that have trouble getting to the ballot box. So we need to be sure we protect the vote, but do that intelligently.
Yep. What are you going to say? Are you going to address the other side? Can you say
Well, I
something?
thought I did
That's
with
the hard part.
yeah, I thought I did with the rural, but in
Oh,
referring to
yeah,
the Constitution
true.
and sort of like that, but I didn't want, frankly, when I would make a speech, I wouldn't want it to be on one hand this and one hand that. I would kind of look for the, hopefully for the middle ground.
Yeah.
Because I think when you do one side, other side, sometimes you just, that's the part they're listening to.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that that's another way of doing it, but I was trying to stick them together.
I see. No, that's a really valid way. I appreciate finding common ground within that. Yeah. Yeah. I see. Yeah. Speaking to the rural voters. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Anyone else want to give it a go? Share what you have?
I can try give an example as well. I'll also have to do it off the cuff.
That's cool.
I got the two opposing views, but I didn't get the speech. So my issue was a little bit safer. It was plastic and the use of plastics.
Yeah.
And so the speech would be something like, you know, plastic has made our lives incredibly convenient over the years, and it has really helped us save money. And, you know, glass is so expensive, and I really appreciate that, you know, a lot of us are trying to save money, and the convenience of getting takeout in plastic and lids that close, you know, all of that is so important. But what I'm asking over here is how can we bring that convenience and maybe take a step further and start using more glass, or only buying plastic that can always be reused, so not one-off items, because it's become time that we need to have a look at the environment. Our overuse of plastic, our free use of plastic without consideration for the environment has led to a place where we're in trouble now, and we're recognizing that. So what steps can we take? And maybe we're going to have to give a little bit more effort. It's not going to be that convenient, but we need to take these steps for the environment. And I'd love to hear more from those people who are using plastic and find it difficult to let go of plastic. Like, what are the things that plastic brings you, and how can we think creatively about using far less plastic, or plastics that are reusable, or shifting that to glass and other products?
I like that. Thank you. I'm voting for you. Yeah, no, that's a really good one. And I like that you invite the people who want to use plastic to just speak more about their feelings and why they need it. I think that's important, that those folks just don't feel scolded. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Pal and Ben, for sharing your little speeches. Others might think about that for future speeches if you have political ambitions, or you coach leaders, or when you're in a leadership position, even in your communities or your families. So the next thing I want to get to is I want to talk about authenticity and whoopsie, where's my slide here? Authenticity. Whoa, look at that. We went all the way back. Authenticity versus being handled. The public wants authentic leaders. And one of the biggest feelings that the public have is that leaders can't be trusted, and that leaders will do anything to be elected. And they're right. The public is correct. Most leaders will do anything to be elected, and there is a huge tension for our leaders. Imagine, particularly if you're in a political field, the fear to say something wrong, the potential backlash, the public backlash, the press is a huge thing. But as a result, what happens is that leaders get so tight that they forget that their greatest gift is really themselves. And how can we use ourselves, and to know actually that our personal development as leaders and our ability to feel well in our own skin is usually what helps people come across. And this is where psychology comes in. There are some leaders who can really do this. You really feel that they're genuine. They speak authentically. They move us. They're out of the box thinkers. And one of the things is that people feel that they have to hide their shortcomings. Political people are very well vetted, but I want to suggest that we vet ourselves, or if you are working with leaders, vet the leaders. That we ourselves work on before the criticisms that we feel we might face. What might come at you as a leader, as a political person. And because leaders need to anticipate this before and consider, well, what really are, we all have shortcomings, we all have limitations. And another thing I want folks to consider is that your shortcomings aren't necessarily your own, but they belong actually to the group, to the city. We're not just limited as individuals. And how can you then make that, appealing to people? So what I'm suggesting people do is, let's see here. How to transform shortcomings into gifts and how to speak about them. So let's take, for example, Joe Biden. Some of us might have felt when he was running for president, well, I felt this. I don't know if you all felt this, but I felt, oh my goodness, this man is not a very good speaker. How is he going to come across? He's not the most charismatic of people. But he has a shortcoming there. He has a limitation. How might he present himself with his shortcoming and see it as a gift? So here's my example. If I was Biden, I might have said something like this. I'm being criticized for not being good on the stump and that I won't be able to campaign effectively. It's true. I'm certainly not as gifted a speaker as President Obama was. His speeches inspired me too. And as some of you might know, I have a history of stuttering. And as a public speaker and a person, you can imagine how challenging this has been for me in my life. But through the shortcoming, I've really learned about perseverance. I've learned about not giving up when things get tough. I feel for what people go through. I feel those difficulties. And I've seen my share of sorrow and loss, and I can relate to that in others. This strength helps me to keep the needs and hardship of the American people foremost in my mind. So that would be a way to frame and feel into your shortcoming, find your gift in that, and then how can you present it to the public? So you might consider, if you look at this slide, you might reflect on your own shortcomings and what have you learned from them? If you can't learn something from your shortcomings, then as a leader and or a facilitator or a political person, you're just hiding them. And then you'll get nailed for them sometime in public. But if you're at peace with them by noticing what they are, working on them inside of yourself, seeing the shortcoming as a strength, and then bringing that out in public, naming it before someone else brings it out for you, and revealing it as a gift, you'll be much more effective. Yeah. Any thoughts or questions about that? Okay, moving on. Another thing that leaders and political people have a really hard time doing is to model growth and change. Our elected officials feel extremely boxed in. They feel they can't change their position. Can you imagine that as people, just as individuals? You can't change your position. You have one viewpoint and you have to stick with it. And if you don't stick with it, you're seen as opportunistic or you're seen as wishy-washy. And it is true. Many political people are opportunistic and wishy-washy. But if you do make a change, if you want to evolve, how can you speak about that evolution to the public? Most people don't do that. But the leader must do this. And it also helps all of us. What did you learn, for example? People have changed their views throughout time. Political people have, leaders have. How can you explain, how did you change in your views, for example, towards immigration or inequality or whatever the issue is? And that's just so extremely important. And it's not something that you see very often. Not that people really share in a way that has a lot of depth and feeling to it. So I want to encourage people to think about that. Let's see. So to model growth and change, the kinds of things you might think about is, as we said, to explain your growth and evolution and speak of change and learning as a strength. Don't let others frame it as a weakness. Name your earlier position and discuss how you came to hold it. And then share how you changed and where you are. Yeah. When a leader talks about her own growth, you have to know that you're not just talking about yourself. You really are modeling something for others. If you're talking about how your views around immigration have changed, around racism, whatever it is that you're learning, others will also resonate. And you might frame this in your speeches by saying, I know I'm speaking about something that others feel as well. One of the biggest issues in our times is polarization. How can we understand it? The strong emotions and history that fuel polarization. And probably most of us have already come to understand that just trying to convince someone of your viewpoint is usually not effective. Has anyone had a different view? I have to say, most people usually don't convince people. But how to speak to it, how to feel into the deeper belief systems that each position holds, how to find the essential value that's at the root of it, how to invite meaningful interaction that touches on the values of each side. It's tough. It is really, really tough. I challenge myself to speak to an issue which I find like abhorrent, terrible. How can you even open up and frame something in a position in such strong polarization? So I took the issue of, do you remember? I'm sure everyone remembers the white nationalist march in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is still right now in our news, which began as a protest about the removal of the statue of the Confederate General Robert E. Lee. I think most of us here, you watch the news, I assume most of us were pretty shocked and fearful and pained to see Americans chanting, "Jews will not replace us," brandishing tiki torches and swastikas. It was pretty shocking. How can you even speak to that kind of a polarized situation? So this is where I challenge myself as a facilitator. And this is a little speech that I might have given. Today in Charlottesville, a group protested the planned removal of the statue of General Robert E. Lee, commander of the Confederate Army. Most of us watched in horror as protesters marched with tiki torches, brandishing swastikas and Confederate flags, chanting, "Jews will not replace us." That kind of hatred harms our country. And despite the offense, I am challenging myself. I am challenging myself to feel into the passions of this position. What must it be like to be a son or a daughter of the Confederacy? To even be an ancestor of Robert E. Lee? What is it like to live with the legacy that your ancestors owned Black people? Yes, this way of life is gone, thank goodness. The agony of this history is part of our American story. And those of us who are descendants of slave owners are faced with a complex set of feelings. We don't want to turn against our ancestors and feel shame due to their actions. We want to feel that we belong to this country and that our history is valuable. We are looking for a place in the country that now actually is looking down on us. This is painful. And I want to tell these protesters, I want to tell these white nationalists, I want to tell you folks that deep down you have more in common with those whom you battle. You are looking for your place, that precious feeling of belonging and pride. It's the same desire kindled in African-American people to throw off the chains of slavery and the police boots on their neck. It is the sense of home that Jewish people longed for when they fled pogroms and concentration camps. It is the deepest human longing for all people who risk everything and flee violent circumstances to reside in these United States of America. There's room enough for us all. We all need to feel our pride and sense of home without denigrating others. It is the only way forward. Feel pride in your vision to live in a country that insists on freedom and belonging for all people. So that's how I got going deeply into the feeling of what must it be like to have ancestors who are part of that history. Many of us have those experiences, but how to address it, how to feel into it. They actually feel that they don't belong anymore. How can we talk about that? Does that make sense to folks? These are some of the deeper polarized issues that are so abhorrent. It's really hard to go deep down and get underneath them to even discuss them. Thank you, Ben. I see your thumb. Last thing I want to mention, because I know we're coming to an end soon, is knowing our social identity. Leaders, really all of us, need to know our social identity and how we're going to be perceived and impacted by others. The public often does not see individuals. They see our social identity, they see our gender, they see our race, they see our age, and they might not see certain things, but they might know about them, like religion, sexual orientation, or class background. But all of these social factors are intimately connected to how we're received in public and the impact that we make. Knowing your social identity is important because it allows you to not assume that others have the same reference points. Leaders get criticized when they assume that everyone has the same life lens. Leaders must see how their views are shaped by certain factors and speak to the limitations and privileges as well as the challenges. So for example, when the pandemic took hold, you might have noticed that people just spoke, a lot of political people and leaders spoke very easily about social distancing. Just social distance, people. That's all you have to do. However, there's an implicit assumption there. That is a politician who's not aware of her social identity, because she's not aware that not everyone lives in situations where you can social distance. Unaware that some of us live in poverty, some of us live in very small apartments or really densely populated situations. So although social distancing is important, if you're a politician who lives in a house, if you're educated, if you can make your living online, you are not relating to the many people who can't. And it is this feeling of inclusion that is then missing, and the assumption that we make of a shared life lens and experience. So if you're able to communicate about that, you do much better. A harmless example of this, because most of the examples are not really so harmless, but Biden uses words such as malarkey. That's a very old-fashioned word. And he's speaking to his age group. But he's lost probably 2/3 of the population using the word malarkey. He's speaking to a particularly white, older American group of people. It doesn't mean he shouldn't say it, but when he says it, he should say, oh my goodness, here I go. I've lost half of the population, friends. Let's see, how would my grandkids, what would they use instead of malarkey? Or what would the youngest voters use? That he should relate to all of us. Michelle Obama, and I'll close with a few words from her because I think she is masterful at being able to use her social identity and be aware of it and the impact that she has. When she spoke at the 2020 Democratic Convention, she referenced her social identity as a Black woman, and she acknowledged that many people might actually dismiss her message as a result of that. And she brilliantly named the part of the world, of the country that would dismiss her. This is what she said. She said, now I understand that my message won't be heard by some people. We live in a nation that's deeply divided, and I am a Black woman speaking at the Democratic Convention. But enough of you know me by now. You know that I tell you exactly what I'm feeling. You know I hate politics, but you also know that I care about this nation. And you know how much I care about all of our children. She is really masterful at acknowledging her social identity and speaking to the side that is not her, but other. So facilitators, leaders, political folks would all be helped to have that kind of an awareness. I think I'm about at the end of my time. I just want to ask if you all have any comments or questions. And I know that Julie wanted to close us out. It's just kind of a brief thing, little lunchtime thing today. So I appreciate you all being here and listening and being interested.
Dawn, I just want to pick up on one thing.
Yeah.
The slide that you had right in the beginning.
Yep.
Talking about how leaders should be facilitators. And I had that slide in the back of my head as this was going on, and like, you know, what the response or like how that actually looks. And I think I had this idea of a facilitator doing this like overt facilitation of both sides. But what I'm hearing as you speak, it's this very subtle background facilitation that speaks to both sides, and in that way validates both points of view. And I'm really moved by that. I think it's a beautiful model of not handling the crowd, because as a leader, as a facilitator, you can end up handling the crowd and then being a little bit maybe coming off as facetious or something. And yeah, I'm really moved by that. So thank you. Appreciating it.
Sure. I mean, sometimes, as you know, and all your experience, Pally, you do have to dialogue with both views, but oftentimes you can really go deeply into both views and you could find an essence that both would agree with. Like that, when I was meditating on that Charlottesville scene, I really had to feel, what is that? Let's say, you know, Robert E. Lee was my great grandfather. What would I feel about that? You know, that's a big thought to have. And with the zeitgeist now, I would feel that I don't belong in this new America. And that is the same feeling, obviously, that Black folks have felt, that immigrants have felt, that Jews have felt. It's the same. How can we appeal?
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And often as a politician, or sometimes, you know, a leader, when you do have the platform to speak, you're speaking out and you maybe not dialoguing. And I really appreciate the piece that you did. Like, it gave me this insight, like, wow, yeah, how complex is it to be proud of an ancestor who has been part of the forming of this country, and at the same time being ashamed and like aghast at a whole bunch of their actions. And it's complex. So yeah, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for saying it, because that complexity needs to be validated. If people just feel scolded and that they're not on track, I don't think we do much with polarization. Yeah. And I know people here know that. Julie, go for it. Yeah.
One thought I have about the complexity, I've even noticed in this, and you're talking, and I was talking, most people use the word both sides. Like there's only two sides. And I often find that simplification problematic, and wonder if you've thought about that at all, because like, think about abortion, for example. Many people might be okay with it in certain circumstances. For, you know, there's a whole continuum of it, or I mean, other issues where here we've got this whole issue up on Mauna Kea. It's very complex. I don't feel there are two sides. I feel there are many, many sides. But the way we frame things, our two-party system, and the way it's very polarizing just by the language. Have you considered how to talk about things in a way that doesn't just perpetuate that duality?
Yes, I think you're saying it. Talk about the complexity. Talk about, you know, people who are abortion rights advocates, in order to stay true to their point, right? They often leave out the feelings that they have when you have a 20-month fetus that's being aborted. That's part of the conversation too. It's being honest also. It's not just so clear cut. There's a lot of complexity. Do you agree with that, Julie?
Yeah, sorry, I got distracted because I was also watching the chat. The chats.
Okay, yeah.
Pardon me.
I think we need, it's kind of what I was saying in the beginning, psychologically, this duality of I'm right or wrong, something's good or bad, right? We're not learning from the beginning in our family systems and in our schools to hold discomfort of duality and multiple views, and that it's okay. We needn't be so one-sided. Also in our own thinking. It actually gives a lot of relief. That's my experience in working with people. To not have to be so dug in is actually a great freedom. Yeah.
We probably have time for one more comment or question. If anyone has anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Please feel free to speak, someone who wants to.
And also, just to let you know, I am putting the link to the online survey about today's talk in the chat. So if you want to get going on that, you can.
Yeah.
Anyone, I mean, we've had some interesting comments in the chat, but if anyone has anything specific they'd like to bring up, I could read some of these.
Yeah. I'm reading them a little too, and I'm happy if people want to interact more. Well, I can say mahalo to you all. Nice being with you all today on a rainy Portland day.
I just wanted to do a quick check in. Your book that's available on Amazon, the one that speaks to this.
Yes, it's on Amazon and it's also on my website. If you dawnmenken.com, or you can, Google it on Amazon. Thank you. Yeah, I've been very excited to hear. I recently heard that an Australian woman who's running for office is finding it very useful, and she actually mentioned it at her town hall meeting. That was really fun to hear, because I really think it's hard work to change the political discourse. And so I'm happy that we're finding a little bit of resonance.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming today. Can we give a virtual another round of applause for Dawn, even bigger, because now we heard everything she's talking about. Thank you so much, Dawn. We appreciate you being here. Do take a minute to click on that link and do our online survey. It really helps with our grant funding for this series when we have your comments. Please do check your email. I will be sending out the slides and a video link, and hope to see you next month. I've also put the link to register for Joan Schaefer's talk on the power of positivity. And if you folks have an idea for a talk and would like to be one of our speakers, I'm very open to others joining as presenters. So thank you so much. I hope you have a rest of the holiday season is safe for you folks, and you enjoy the new year, and we'll see you in 2021. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you again so much for having me, everybody. And I'm also more than open to receiving any kind of communications. If you want to drop me an email, you can just go to my website and contact me through there. I like hearing what people are thinking and doing, and any positive work. And I want to thank people here for doing the great work that you're doing, because I know you are. And thanks to the ikahi Mediation Center and you folks who are working on that. Yeah. Okay.